Story 1. My cousin died when she was a baby, not even a year old. I have never lost a child, but obviously my aunt and uncle have. The most upsetting thing they said was when people told them, I couldn't survive if it happened to me, or, how sad. I'm going to go home and hug my child tighter today. The latter was especially painful to them. Both phrases or variations of them were said to them often and still are, even years later. They felt these statements lacked real empathy. People were making their trauma all about themselves, which upset my aunt and uncle because they could never hug their daughter again. Since they were still alive, they felt people were implying that because they survived, it meant they didn't love their daughter enough, as they did not kill themselves or give up on life by wallowing in grief. Story 2. Look at the positives. You have more time for yourself now. Story 3. The average cost of raising a child is around £200,000. Think of what you can do with that money now. Story 4. Yes, your child died yesterday, but you still come to work today, or you will be fired. Story 5. Not even 2 years after we lost our daughter, when asked why I was not going to the friend group holiday retreat with everyone else, I kept saying I was just busy with work. Most of the couples have children, although they would be left with grandparents. Finally, I gave in to one of our childless friends and said it is just hard to hear people talking about their kids. It might be an offhand comment, but it means I am sad for the rest of the day and I will not enjoy any of the activities planned. He responded, Oh, I did not realize it was still bothering you that much. No, after a couple of months, it is not like we have never been through the worst thing we have ever experienced. Happy smiles and looking towards a brighter future. Also, the phrases everything happens for a reason, it was God's will, and they are in a better place now, are not helpful. It is better to say nothing if that is the best you can do. Story 6. Telling them it is going to get better. It might be true, but it does not change the fact that they will never get back their child. Story 7. There is a colleague I work with who comes from a very conservative Christian family. A woman at work has a son who has epilepsy and nearly died twice. He told her it happened because of her sin. If it were my children, I would have jumped over the desk and knocked him out. Story 8. While I hope this is serious, the most offensive things I remember were, God had better plans for him. It was God's will. He's in a better place. And the ones that made me stop talking to these people. You didn't love him enough. You still have other children. Why would you let this happen? You need to get over it. Forget all of them. Story 9. I once heard of a parent who lost their child and was often told, well, you still have one of them at least. It makes me wonder when we lost our sympathy as a species. Story 10. All excellent answers, but I think the worst is what Alex Jones and his associates did in the aftermath of Sandy Hook. For years, they claimed the children were actors, that they were still alive, or that they never existed, suggesting they were just props for people trying to take away guns. These claims, made repeatedly for profit on his show, sparked years of harassment campaigns, stalking, grave desecration, threats, and prolonged unbearable grief for the parents. Why? Because it was profitable for him and his associates. It was revealed in court that he knew talking about Sandy Hook would cause huge spikes in purchases on his website. It has been about 2 years since Jones was ordered to pay $1 billion to the families he hurt, and he still has not paid a single cent. While Jones continues spending tens of thousands on vacations and living extravagantly, Erica Lafferty, daughter of the slain principal, is struggling to pay for cancer treatment. Story 11. When my brother died, he was 4 and had cancer. My mom was told, but you said goodbye, and if he lived, he would be disabled. The chemotherapy he had ruined his growth and he was unable to walk. He would have had hearing problems and dental problems. But no, having a disabled child is not worse than having a dead child. It was like she was trying to say it is better that he is dead than disabled. Another thing my mom was told was, at least you still have your other children. No, you can grieve for the child you lost without feeling like a bad parent because you still have 2 living. People are just insensitive. Story 12. Fiancé's mother and grandmother have both told us to get over our deceased baby. The first time was about a month after. Story 13. Anything that minimizes their loss, tries to make it better, or paints it in a positive way disrespects the reality of that pain. Many people do this out of discomfort with pain, either someone else's or their own by proxy. Just honor their pain. Loss is terrible, grief is terrible, and unexpected or unusual loss, like losing a child, is among the most terrible. Let it be what it is and speak from there. Story 14. I can't read all these comments this early in the morning without affecting my emotions, so pardon me if these have been said, but the two things I suggest never saying are, at least you have other children, and it's time to move on. Spoken from experience. Story 15. When my husband died young, a divorced friend of mine said that going through a divorce and going through a death are pretty much the same thing. When I said no, they are not, she asked what the difference was. I said, my husband's life is the difference. Story 16. I gave birth prematurely. It was traumatic and we both nearly died. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I was full of guilt and grieving the pregnancy. A friend who was pregnant but a month behind me said around 33 weeks. I bet you're glad you're not pregnant anymore. I feel like a beached whale. I can't wait to have this baby. You're so lucky. Story 17. It was God's will. Everything happens for a reason. You can have another one. I've heard people say all those things to try and cheer a grieving parent up. I do not know how they are foolish enough to believe that such statements will actually make a person feel better about their own child dying. Story 18. Have you heard about what happened between two Australian women during the baby shower and the funeral of the baby 3 months after birth? One of the women was the mother, and the other brought tequila to the funeral and made a speech saying the baby was resting in heaven. Story 19. God has another flower for his garden, or whatever people like to say. Another phrase is that you are not given burdens you cannot carry. I am not religious, and I am not against religious people, but I am against people who say hurtful things out of spite or thoughtlessness. If you know the grieving parent and you both share the same faith, and you know this is what they believe and it would comfort them, by all means do what feels right. But especially when you say these things to a non-religious person, it is more than a slap in the face. It is not helpful. Saying, they can just have another is also not good. As a non-religious person, I would not tell a religious person that heaven does not exist if they believe in it. It does not change anything either way. Showing compassion and offering condolences without discussing or acknowledging a potential afterlife is possible. Just be kind and gentle, and avoid making their grief worse. Story 20. My 2-year-old nephew died, and if one more person said, God needed an angel, I was going to punch them in the throat. I do not care what your religious beliefs are. God does not need a neurodivergent, otherwise healthy, 2-year and 2-week-old baby. Story 21. I know how you feel. When our 15-month-old drowned, people who had experienced some sort of loss would say that. I knew they were just trying to show empathy, but it really upset my wife. Every person's pain is unique to them. Just because you lost a parent, sibling, or even a child, you don't know how someone else feels. You only know how you felt in that situation. When someone I know experiences loss, I explain that I have experienced great loss as well. While my experience taught me it is terrible, I do not know how they feel. However, I know they are going through a terrible experience, and if there is anything I can do to help, I am here for them. Story 22. My dad died at my grandma's house. It was unexpected since he was recovering from surgery. His dad, my grandpa, found him in the morning, and everything sort of crumbled from there. Condolences started to come in within days. Although my grandpa was retired, he remained friends with people from his old workplace. Most of them tried their best to make him feel better, though how do you comfort a parent grieving a child's death at any age? Eventually, a woman from his former office approached him, and the conversation went as follows. Lady, I am so sorry for your loss. Grandpa, thank you. It's been very hard. It was unexpected. Lady, I understand. I just went through that myself and know that kind of grief. Grandpa, I'm sorry to hear about your loss. Lady, thank you. My dog recently passed away, and it was devastating. Grandpa, sorry? Lady, my dog died. So I understand what it's like to lose a child. That grief is overwhelming. Grandpa did not take this well, to say the least. I thought at least my dad would be amused or offended by being compared to a woman's dog dying. Not to diminish her loss, but comparing a dog to a person, especially one's dead child, no matter their age, is a serious faux pas. Skimming through similar stories, many such remarks also haunted my grandparents, caused a crisis of faith for a long time. While my grandpa passed with some faith restored, my grandma is still struggling. Story 23. I am a grieving mother, having lost my daughter 3 years ago when she took her own life during the pandemic at age 34. I have had people say, "I know how you feel. I lost my husband." Another actually said, "I know how you feel. I lost my stepfather." Do not compare the grief of a parent who has lost a child to anything or anyone else. Please. Story 24. It was God's plan. Believe in Him and all will be well. This happened after I miscarried my second child. Story 25. You are young. You can always have more children. Any variation of it is all part of God's plan, or they are in a better place now. Story 26. Think of all the money you are saving on birthday presents. Story 27. People told my mom that my deceased brother could be in a better place. Then they asked her if he was a Christian. Why burden her with that thought at the funeral? Story 28. Everything happens for a reason. I am sure there is a lesson for you to learn in this. Those were the absolute worst ones. And then, at least you know that you can get pregnant. Story 29. So I lost my daughter at 22 weeks due to preterm premature rupture of membranes. I was sharing my heartache on social media. My cousin responded, "Life is hard. What about me? I had a triple or quadruple bypass." Since the loss occurred right before the 2020 election Tuesday, and it took a few days after I was released from the hospital while I was still grieving, my mother said, "Oh honey, I'm sorry, I understand. Think about how Donald Trump feels." Story 30. I lost a baby to sudden infant death syndrome in 2018. One of the worst things said to me was, "God needed him more than you." Excuse me? A coworker told me 2 weeks after my son died, "I know how you feel. My dog died the other day." A dog does not compare to a human child you gave birth to and fed from your own body. Story 31. Tell them that they have to accept the death of their child because it is what God wanted. This happened to friends of my family who are not religious. It is awful. Story 32. Some of these responses are awful, some misguided. But I am now wondering what is the right thing to say in a circumstance like this. Certainly, if they are willing to grieve, just being available to listen is best. Short of that, I am finding it hard to figure out anything to say beyond, "I am so sorry." Story 33. My dad's friend lost an adult son to suicide. He was very religious and had other religious friends. One of those friends gave condolences but added that he was not in a better place since people like him will certainly go to hell. Story 34. My mother lost 2 children before I was born, one stillborn and the other lived for only a few hours. My mother did not talk about it much, but after the loss of one of these baby girls, one of my unkind aunts, who was pregnant at the time, called my mother and asked if she could borrow her baby things like the crib and changing table because my mother would not be needing them now. Needless to say, I was told that my father, without saying a word, picked up his keys and left the house to confront his sister. I do not know what happened after that, as it was never discussed. I did not find this out until my late teens, but I could never interact with that aunt once I knew. Story 35. The worst. Your child is with God. This was God's will. God needed another angel. None of these are comforting. Every time there is a tragedy and people spout religious platitudes, it makes my blood boil. Story 36. Luckily, he was only adopted, so it does not really count as losing your own. I said to my stepdad about my adoptive brother. Story 37. At least I am still alive. Could have been worse. I could be the one who died. It is not like they were famous. Can I have sex with the corpse yet? I do not know why they hated you so much. Story 38. I think the worst thing to say is nothing. To see the parent out and about for the first time after the passing and to never mention it. This happened to me numerous times. I know it was because people did not know what to say or did not want to hurt me, but it still hurt. As time has moved on, it hurts for people to act as if my daughter never existed. When I mention something about her life, they say nothing. They ignore the reference and change the subject. That hurts the most. She existed and she mattered. I do not want her to be forgotten. Story 39. I am sorry for your loss. Move on. That person from the IT crowd. Story 40. God works in mysterious ways. Or anything involving religion. Story 41. Do you mean someone who lost a child or a grieving parent? Story 42. Seems like it is what God wanted. That is never appropriate. To suggest some higher power that may or may not exist wanted a child to die early. That is just wrong. Story 43. Why are you so emotional when all you did was complain and essentially disregard them for their lifetime? That is probably not the best thing to say and is very specific. Story 44. God has his purpose. There is a plan. He works in mysterious ways. I understand that people just want to say something, anything to help, and they are clueless about what they should say. But this is not it. It has been 21 years since my 15-year-old sister died. I am still waiting for the big reveal on how this is God's plan for the good. Story 45. When we lost our twins, we were told, maybe you were not meant to have children. Be glad it wasn't one of you. And you can always have more. Story 46. I'm sorry, Lois. I thought if I shook him enough, he would stop crying. I was kind of right. Story 47. Well, Christmas shopping just got a little easier, right? Story 48. Elbow the father and say, the child was not yours anyway. Then wiggle your eyebrows suggestively at the mother. Story 49. Everything will be all right. I was 18 years old when I lost a child at 2 months. I am 52 years old now, and as I am writing this, I am starting to cry. This is not something you will ever get over. And no, everything will not be all right. This happened in 1990. I just thank the Lord above that I had gone and gotten his pictures taken. Otherwise, I would not even have a single picture. I will always miss and love you, Brian Carl. Story 50. When my grandson died at 4 months old this past Christmas, the worst thing some friends did was not say anything at all. They did not know what to say, and instead of saying just that, I do not know what to say other than I am so sorry, they chose to say nothing. Not acknowledging the pain my son and I were going through was incredibly hurtful. Story 51. They are in a better place. Well, you can leave with that nonsense. Story 52. It happened for a reason. Yes, we have the death certificate right here. Reasons do not help, my friend. They are still dead. Story 53. Everything happens for a reason, or it was meant to be, or it was God's plan. Time heals all wounds, or you need to be strong for your other children, or you will get over it eventually. At least you had them for a while, or you should be grateful for the time you had, or other people have it worse. I know exactly how you feel. Story 54. Everything. Anything. Unless it is, I do not have the words, or I cannot begin to imagine what you are going through. There is nothing you can say to a grieving parent because they still have their child or children, and that alone is so painful to them. It is a wonder that fights do not break out during memorial services for children. My son's first best friend, whose parents owned the ranch my parents were caretakers for and who I babysat for 3 or 4 years, was killed in an avalanche in Vail, Colorado in 2011 or 2012. I do not remember exactly what year it was. He was just 13. My son was 15, and they had gone to different schools and drifted apart, but it hit us so incredibly hard. When we went to the memorial service the following week, the only thing I could say to his mother was, "You were an amazing mother all his life." That was 12 or 13 years ago. She is divorced and left the valley because it was too hard with all the memories of her baby boy. If you have to say something to a grieving parent, I recommend you say something truthful like, "I cannot imagine what you are going through, but I am so sorry," or something personal about the child in whatever capacity you knew them. Otherwise, saying, "I know what you are going through," or something like that will only make them want to scream. No, you do not. How could you say that? Story 55. Telling them that their child is in the loving arms of Jesus. Story 56. I am going to give my child a tight hug tonight. I cannot imagine losing my baby. Story 57. Oh man, I have a list. Grieving parent here. You will feel better soon. Trying to relate when others clearly cannot. At least you can move on with your lives now. At least you still have your other child. I think people mean well, but it is really okay not to say anything. Just be there. Most of the time, people say things to fill the silence because they are uncomfortable, and that is usually when it goes wrong. Story 58. They are in a better place now. Like, come on, there is no way anybody actually thinks it is better to be anywhere else than with your parents. Story 59. It was God's will. Someone said that to my parents when my 18-year-old brother died of cancer. My parents never spoke to that person again. Story 60. Not the worst, but I really hated the "you are in my prayers" or "I will pray for you" remarks. You know what? Forget you, forget your prayers, and forget your God. Story 61. Any sort of religious justification. It is not the time. Story 62. It's God's will. God needed him more than you do. Shouldn't you be over it by now? But worse is absolutely nothing. After my child died, my entire social network abandoned me. Complete silence. I had no one. I guess none of them knew what to say. Even my mother withdrew because I wasn't enough support to her. Hearing, "Oh, your poor mother," losing her granddaughter, about my deceased child. Story 63. They were going to die anyway, we all are. Shall we go for a beer? Story 64. It was God's will. It was God's plan. God needed another angel. Story 65. He or she is in a better place. It was God's plan. He or she was called home. Story 66. They are in a better place. You can have another one, right? Story 67. That their newly widowed daughter-in-law is attractive. Someone said this in the comments on a post about a martyred soldier in India. Story 68. Hope you kept the receipt for that. It did not even last 10 years before it stopped working. Story 69. Mine was you have the other two. It was just a cluster of cells you have more. No, that was a baby growing, not just a cluster of cells. Story 70. Cheer up. You can still enjoy spending time with other people's children. Story 71. I am not sorry for this loss at all. I am the one who caused it, but believe what you want. I do not care, he will be begging anyway. Story 72. Enjoy. I am busy. Please do not disturb. Goodbye. Story 73. So was this the more cheerful one? No joke. I heard a man ask the parents this at their daughter's funeral. Their daughter had died in an accident at the age of 8. Story 74. We have been trying to reach you about your vehicle's extended warranty. Story 75. Saying it is their fault their child is dead. My parents both said this to each other in front of me after one of my siblings died, and I do not know how to feel because they were both right, but it still seemed like a sickeningly unproductive thing to say. Story 76. My parents' best friends lost both of their children. My uncle took it as an opportunity to try to convince them that God is not real. He said to the grieving mother, "If heaven were real, then you would not be sad right now because your children would be in heaven." Story 77. After our baby brother was killed, hit by a car at 4 years old, my father's best friend told him, "At least you don't have that little brat to worry about anymore." They did not speak for a few years. Story 78. I have a craving for baby back ribs right now. Story 79. This was probably God's plan for your character development. Story 80. Yes, exactly. Saying, "I know how you feel," can unintentionally minimize the uniqueness of their grief and make them feel like their personal experience is being overlooked. It is often better to acknowledge their pain and offer support without making comparisons. Story 81. At least that is one less thing you have to worry about now. I could not even imagine anyone uttering those words. Story 82. I like how some of the replies are realistic answers, but others are like something out of scenes from a hat. Story 83. If they have more than one child, at least you have insert name. Story 84. Everything happens for a reason. He is in a better place. Story 85. Just try again. Have another baby. There is still time. As if they are replaceable. Story 86. My brother died about 20 minutes after being born. A few weeks later, my grandmother told my grieving mother that she could not understand how hard it was for her to lose her grandchild. Story 87. I'm sure they are in a better place and I'm sure you will have more. As if a child is like Skittles in a vending machine. Story 88. When people say God will replace your loved one that you have lost with something better, this is not something that should be said after losing someone. Story 89. Heard this at the church my mom attends when I was a kid. She is in a better place now. Guess who got punched in the face? Story 90. Just give it time. It is hard right now, but one day you will be okay again. Really? Story 91. My brother died recently. I don't know what my mom hated hearing, but I was definitely tired of hearing. If there's anything I can do, I understand that they're trying to console us, but I heard it over 100 times, and there is literally nothing you can do to fill the void in my life. I was always tempted to say, yes, stop the tsunami of pain and grief that is dragging me out to sea after tearing apart my neighborhood quickly, or retroactively be my best friend for 27 years. Story 92. He or she was meant to go. He or she was not meant for this cruel world. Variants of these were very upsetting for my cousin when she lost her baby. Story 93. I had a patient come to me who is a grieving grandparent. The only thing I could think to say was, I am so sorry. I couldn't imagine. Because I couldn't, no one could. Story 94. Your child was not very bright anyway, so it was no great loss. Story 95. Well, you were gonna save some money. I have twins and I joke about, well, we have a spare. But if I do not have 6 eyes in my head tracking all 3 toddlers anytime we are near water. Buy cheap personal flotation devices. $10 on Amazon. Coast Guard rated equipment. Story 96. Well, at least you will not have to worry about paying for their college tuition anymore. Story 97. I am sorry for your loss. Move on. Story 98. Your child was not baptized into my sect or religious group, so they are now suffering in hell. Do better with your other children. Story 99. 10% of adults have a criminal record, so there is only a 90% chance you would actually miss your child. Story 100. The worst thing to say is, everything happens for a reason. No, it does not. Story 101. I know how you feel. Second worst. He is in a better place. In either case, how do we know? Story 102. God. I heard so many. One of the worst was from my own mom's mouth. If your family was Christian and you had taken them to church, this wouldn't have happened. My son was 18, queer, and struggling with bipolar disorder. Story 103. From the perspective of having had a miscarriage, I would say 1. The terminology spontaneous abortion. 2. It was not healthy, there was something seriously wrong. 3. You will see them in heaven. This next case was not about a child, but about my husband after he had a stroke, though it still applies. Many people at work would ask me, how are you doing? We worked together at the time, so there were many people who asked that. In my head, I would think, how would you be doing if your spouse just had a stroke? Especially if the question is not from someone really close to you. About 7 years ago, a coworker lost her husband. We were not particularly close, just chatted occasionally. After he passed, I took her aside and told her that I would never ask how she was doing or about my situation, but that if she ever wanted someone to talk to just sit with her, or if she needed to cry, I would be that person. She said that really meant a lot to her. Story 104. Try not to remember the bad things he did. I heard it said once. It did not go down well even though the guy wasn't an angel. Story 105. Get over it. Would actually make me die emotionally if I were a grieving parent. Story 106. Everything happens for a reason. I stopped talking to many people who said that when my daughter died. Story 107. What are you going to do with the body? If you are not going to eat it, can I? Story 108. Anything besides these two things, I am so sorry, and I am here for you for whatever you need. Just reach out and I am here for you. Anytime, day or night. Do not talk about Jesus. Do not talk about how everything happens for a reason. Do not ask questions about what happened. Nothing. Simply show up and help. Your presence is what is appreciated, not your words. Story 109, you are all wrong. The worst thing you can do is point and say, ha ha, like Nelson Muntz from The Simpsons. Then get back in your car, back over the child again, and speed away. Story 110. I think it is perfectly okay and probably good for your mental health and well-being to distance yourself from friends and acquaintances who say deeply insensitive things in situations such as the death of a child. Story 111. Worst things to say to a grieving parent. 1. You can always try for another child. 2. God needed another angel, or any comment related to God. Not every death can be blamed on God. 3. Time will make you feel better. 4. You probably weren't meant to be a parent. 5. There is always adoption. 6. At least he or she went fast and painlessly and will not be suffering. Story 112. Pretty much anything. It is not like you can fix this with words. Nothing you say is going to make it better. The good news is you do not have to talk. You can just sit on the sofa and listen while they talk. Just go. Sit with them. Sometimes people worry about how they will comfort someone who is grieving, and they think to themselves, I will start crying and then they will have to comfort me and that will be awful. I will stay home and let their other friends who know what they are doing comfort them. But if everybody thinks this way, the grieving parents end up alone. Just go. Cry if that is what you are feeling. At least then the parents are not crying alone. Story 113. Someone in my family lost a child in a tragic accident. A very religious uncle of that child expressed that, according to his beliefs, the child was probably in hell. He said this to the parents. Story 114. Mom, why was Grandma in a box? Also, can we get Starbucks? Probably some kid whose grandmother passed away that day. Story 115. I know the title asks for the worst things you could say, but what would be the correct thing to say? I have felt grief. Anything anyone says always feels empty and pitiful, but when someone else is grieving, there really is nothing else to say. Story 116. There is a television show in my country where they invited a grieving mother. The host asked her, "What is your son's name?" She said, "Yehya," which means one who lives and is not dead. The host then said, "You named him Yehya and he died." Story 117. I know how you feel. I just lost my dog, favorite purse, or a famous person died. Please do not use their grief as your therapy moment. Story 118. You failed as a parent. Now you will have this on your conscience for the rest of your lives. Story 119. You can always have more is probably the worst thing we were told. After years of infertility, we were fortunate to have this child. Another comment was, God must have needed an angel more. Story 120. I am sorry, but it might have been meant to be. God does work in mysterious ways. Story 121. My grandaunt said to her grandchild when they lost their baby, "You can just have another one. This one wasn't pretty anyway." Yes, she was not right in the head, but she was not a good person. Story 122. You're next. Only the good die young. If you cannot afford a casket, I have an old shoebox I could spare. Story 123. Everything happens for a reason. God needed another angel. Story 124. Oh, my baby is taking her first steps. Story 125. It is quite easy to make another one. People accidentally do it all the time. Story 126. After my wife miscarried and wasn't coming around as much for game nights, a former friend of mine asked where she was. I explained that she doesn't take as much joy in playing games since it happened. Mind you, this was less than 2 months after it happened. He responded, "You guys aren't over that yet?" I was very upset. Story 127. Try to see it positively. He or she was a pain anyway, and now you can save some money. Story 128. Think of all the money you have saved on birthday and Christmas presents. Story 129. They are in a better place. I have attended the funerals of 3 children. It is very sad and absolutely tragic. One child had a devastating medical condition and had probably been in a lot of pain. The child's mother said she was thankful the child was no longer in pain, and I felt the same, but I did not say anything about that. You say, I am sorry for your loss, and leave it at that. Story 130. Probably something like, I do not care or dope. My day was great or something stupid and inconsiderate like that. Story 131. I'm not a parent, but I have 3 mothers in my life who have lost their child. It will get easier. They are in a better place, depending on context. But if you want to get real dark, I'm sure he or she is being taken care of in hell. Story 132. I know exactly how you feel. I had to put my dog down several months ago, and it was just like losing a child. Story 133. When my son died, it was the religious nonsense that was truly offensive. God just needed your boy back in heaven for his plan to unfold. So clueless. Story 134. That woman in a certain forum post was bragging about getting pregnant to a woman grieving the loss of both her children and her husband. Also, there was a woman who got drunk at a baby's funeral, was asked not to speak, and then said something like, "May he have eternal peace in heaven." Story 135. A Hertfordshire child social worker said, "Well, you can always have another one," or, "You were lucky it died. Now you don't have to look at what ruined your life every day." The woman is still employed to this day. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.